Hey guys, how's it going? Muthurajah here, back with a new video lesson for you all. Before I get to the actual lesson, do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and hit that notification bell so you get updated with whatever's happening on the channel. Alright, so in this lesson I want to talk about my three personal favorite scales that I hold very close to me. I mean, these three scales are pretty much all I use, whether one chooses to believe it or not. I've become very comfortable with them and have understood so much about music of all styles just from these three scales. All right, before I get to this, there are no modes involved, and I'm not using certain scales like harmonic minor or harmonic major, Hungarian minor, and a lot of those kind of scales because, well, actually I'll explain myself at the end of the video. All right, the first scale, we all know what it is. It's the major scale. Okay, needless to say, it's possibly one of the most commonly used scales across a whole lot of genres of music, be it pop, funk, jazz, metal. It's there. Now, I'm not going to talk about minor scales because the minor scale is pretty much a major scale from a different degree, or actually just from the relative minor of the major key. So I'm not going to talk of that as a separate entity because I think that's a waste of time. Because what starts to happen is that you have the same 7 notes, but because of thought process of trying to separate them as different scales and different sounds, you start to add on too much into the shed, and at the end of it you know too much but you're not able to play anything, which is really a shitty place to be in as a musician, because I think that's where a lot of us actually get stuck. We know too much without the ability to actually execute something from a very simple place. All right, so simple, straight up major scale. I did a couple of lessons on how to practice them, so don't just take the scale and just run it like an exercise. Not just that kind of stuff, but you know, study the harmony behind it. So that's number one. The second scale is a symmetrical diminished, which is either the half whole or the whole half. Okay, now symmetrical, what does that imply? It's equally divided. So okay, what I like about this scale is the fact that it's symmetrical, and it works in 4 positions by default because of it being diminished. So those 4 positions with the same symmetry gives you the same scale, but just gives you a different reference point at the same time. I did do a lesson in the past on diminished harmony hacks. I'm going to put that link in the description below, so check that out if you want to get a little bit more into this. Okay, but very briefly, that is the beauty of the symmetrical diminished scale for me. That's symmetry. Okay, now these are lines that I don't use a lot, but I mess around with them. You might have heard, now that I recall what I played in the beginning, I did something like this. What is that? Sounds cool, right? It's basically 3 triads. A D major triad, A flat major. In this case, it's actually just the 2. Hold on a second. Yeah. But what I'm doing with the triad is that I'm starting with a flat 9 instead of a root. Then I go up to the 11, which is not part of the diminished scale, but then I use that to play the triad down to the A, and then I go up to the E flat, which is a tritone away from the diminished scale, then A flat triad. Right, so those are some sounds you hear in diminished. So on and so forth. So instead of getting just caught up in the patterns of the symmetrical diminished scale, you can take out arpeggios and harmony that's involved in it, which is there in the lesson. The link is right there in the description, so check it out in full. Okay, the last but not the least, and definitely my most favorite scale, I think most of you probably already know what it is. It's the melodic minor. It is insane because it's just 1 note different from a major scale. You have a major scale, you flatten the 3rd, you get the melodic minor. So why do I like this scale so much? Well, for starters, it actually has all 4 triads. It has major triads, it has minor triads, a diminished triad, and an augmented triad. Interesting thing is it doesn't, the major scale doesn't have an augmented triad. So this scale gives you that augmented triad by default without having to search for that note. Okay, so that is just one of a million reasons why I love the scale. It's also got a certain symmetry to it, which I like to combine with the symmetrical diminished scale. And that's a lesson for another time. I don't want to get involved in talking about that because I would never know when to stop, to be honest, because it's beautiful stuff. Okay, so it has all 4 triads present. It's easily usable from a substitute point of view of the major or the minor tonality that scale produces. Right? So it's got this very dark yet colorful sound, and that's what I feel is that 6. Right? Now, I'm sure a bunch of you are like, oh, what about the harmonic minor scale? That's valid too. It is. But I don't want to spend time taking a scale pretty much that's already here and then putting that aside to say just one note difference. So I'd rather use that note as a borrowed note to this melodic minor scale, so I don't have to constantly separately think about that all the time. If I want to go for a melodic minor sound, I know what I have to do. If I want to go for a harmonic minor sound, I know what I have to do. It's just one note, a half step. And then obviously you can use both the notes. Now I have access to both sounds without taking them separately, all right? So again, I didn't talk about minor pentatonic or major pentatonic because they come from the major scale. You can just take the major scale and find those 5 notes, and you can make it a 6-note scale. Yeah. Right? Same with the minor pentatonic. It's there. It's in the major scale. So, bottom line is, take these scales. Don't just use them like this. Study the harmony involved in each scale, each of these 3. Just see, listen, and watch your fingers as they move through these scales. Map it out on a fretboard, print out a fretboard on a sheet of paper and just write it down. Jot down points and just try to find commonalities across the neck. Because one thing about the bass and guitar, it's a necked instrument, so everything's very symmetrical. You can easily move it around. But don't just move it around because you know you can move it, but because there is purpose and intention behind it. Alright, so that's it guys. These are my go-to 3 favorite scales that I will hold on to for dear life as long as I can. Alright, I hope you get something out of this, and until the next one, I'll see you guys in the shed. Peace.